Going to start talking about the Perris Speedway, Perris, California. Do you remember Perris Speedway? It's located in the beautiful city of Perris, California. Steve Evans runs another track called Perris also currently. It's a nice track. It's at the raceway, but this one I'm talking about is a different, different Perris. It's at the fairgrounds by the dam, by the river, Perris Lake. And it was closed down a few years ago. However, there was Speedway at the Perris Fairgrounds. It's a different track than what's being run today. And it all started some years ago. I was watching TV and there was a TV show called like Speedway America. I think Howie Zegner, he produced this TV show. And I think Brad Oxley won that series. It was like a series on TV. And every day after work, I used to watch the Speedway. And I was just enjoying Speedway. I remember watching Brad and Sean McConnell and all these really great Speedway riders race and compete. And I was thinking, like, it was 13 years since I had raced Division One Speedway, and I just enjoyed watching the Speedway. And I was working. I had a young family. I had a big house in Perris, California, the same place where the Speedway track was. And I was just kicking back one day after work, chilling, and I was watching Speedway on TV. It was pretty cool. And my wife at the time, we're no longer married, I had a young family, and she said, "What are you watching?" And I said, "Oh, it's Speedway." I said, "I used to race this like 13 years ago before I had met her. And I never really told her that I was a Speedway racer before. I just kind of like not talked about it. And then she said, "Well, why are you watching Speedway?" And I go, "Well, I used to race it before I met you. And, it's a sport that I like a lot." And then she said, "You never raced Speedway?" And I go, "Yeah, I did." And she goes, "No way. You don't know how to race like those guys. They're good. And you could never be that good." And I'm like, "Well, I don't, maybe I can't be that good, but I used to race." And she kind of didn't believe me. She thought I was blowing hot air up her, what. And so I said, "Well, I'll buy a bike and I'll show you I can ride." And she's laughing at me and kind of mocking me. And she wasn't a really good lady, let's just say that, and very supportive. She wasn't that. But she said, "Okay, yeah, prove it to me." So I went ahead and I found a used Westlake Speedway bike from Brent Warner. Do you remember? Do you remember Brent Warner? He was a good rider. He raced in a few United States Speedway championships, and then he moved over to England and raced in the British League for a while. And he was just a nice guy, Brent Warner. And he's, I guess, living in England still. He's married and everything. But so I bought this sort of pink, fluorescent pink bike, and I went ahead and just said, "Well, I gotta match my uniform." So I found a fluorescent pink pants, and I never really wore pink before, but I just did it for fun. They gave me a racing number, and I found out it was Kelly Moran's old number, 131. I go, "I like that number. I want to be like Kelly Moran. Good luck." And so I went ahead and bought this bike, and I started riding and racing at the Paris in Division Two. And my first race was like, any race, you're not going to do very well. And I just remember, just saying, get better, get better. And I got better. And I think Mike Reed was the star D2 rider at the time. And I just said, I'm going to get that guy. And I went ahead and progressed fairly fast. And sort of became the number one D2 rider at the track. And then they bumped me up to D1. Very nice. So they bumped me up to D1. I was a D1 rider pretty quick after 4 or 5 races or six. And I started racing with the big guys. And I just remember a couple stories that I had. One of them was I was racing in the handicap, and it was a transfer spot to the main event, and there was, I think, only three of us that transferred. And I think Faria was winning, and Schwartz was in second, and I was in third, and Steve Lucero was in fourth, and Steve was trying to pass me, and I'm like, I'm not gonna let you pass me, dude. And so Steve just kept going like on the outside, and then I kept going on the outside, and then Steve kept going on the inside. He was a little faster than me. So I was thinking, I remember in the NASCAR drivers, they just block people, they just blocking because I wanted that final transfer spot. And Steve Lucero was really trying to get that because he wanted to move on to the main event. And I wanted to move to the main event too. I was a fairly new D1 rider at the time. So I went ahead and blocked Steve every which way. And I kind of cut him off and rode a little, I guess, dirty. And Steve didn't appreciate that at all. And he tried hitting me and stuff, but it didn't work. So after the race, I was sitting down, I was fueling my bike, getting ready for the main event. And Steve Lucero came up to me and started yelling at me. And he's kind of scary guy, back in the day. And I was like, excuse me, what do you want? And he goes, you're a dirty rider. You cut me off. And he's yelling at me and screaming. And he like wanted to fight me. And I'm like, dude, I don't want to fight you. I just want to beat you. And he goes, don't ever ride that way. You ride very dangerous and you're cutting me off and I don't appreciate it. And I go, dude, just because you lost, you're mad. And I said, I'm sorry if I offended you, but I'm racing too. You're not the only one on this track, dude. I was very mad at Steve, and he was wanting to fight me, but I wasn't really in the mood to fight. I was in the mood to race a main event. And I said, "Go, Steve, go, get out of here." So he left, and I think he forgot all about it because when I raced at Industry Speedway when he was the referee, he was nice to me, and it seemed like he forgot all about that experience. So I was very happy. And another experience happened when I was in a main event, maybe the same night. I was the only like 0 yard line rider in D1 in the main event. Maybe it was the same night. And the announcer, Scott Lee, is it De Lucero, or he went ahead and he was announcing and he said, look at Brian. He's at the 0 yard line in the main event. And then on the 50 yard line, there was 5 hot D1 riders. Like there was Faria, there was Schwartz, there was like Collins, and there was all these really top notch D1 riders. They're all on the 50. So there was 5 guys on the 50, and then there was one guy on the 10 on the 0. I think it was on the 0. And so, anyways, let me do this really quick. So I went ahead and the announcer's making a big deal out of it because I was like the sole person in front, and I was a new D1 rider, and Scott's like, there's no way there's no way Brian can win this race because I mean he has like all these top riders at the 50. There's 5 of them. When was the last time you saw like 5 riders on the 50 and 1 rider at the 0? That was me. And so I was like I wanted to win that main event. I went out there to win it. I didn't go out there to like, show off or whatever. I was serious to compete and win that race. That's what I wanted. I saw those guys on the 50. I'm like, good, stay back there. Anyways, Scott Lee, the announcer, he was really a good announcer, and he liked me a lot because I was like the hometown guy from Perris because my house was in Perris, the track was in Perris, and people started to like me a little bit because I was from their home and I was a local guy, and most of the speed riders did not live in Perris at the time. So Scott says, there's no way Brian can win this race because he's got like Faria and all these Schwartz and all these really top-notch D1 riders. And he said, does anyone want to make a bet that Brian's going to lose this race? Because I know Brian's going to get whipped against all these top dogs. So one guy, he was drunk with a beer in his hand. He yelled, Brian's going to win this race. Shut up. And Scott said, "Oh yeah, really?" And he says, "Yeah, Brian's a good writer. He's gonna beat these guys." And maybe I wasn't that good of a writer, but anyway, Scott says, "Well, hey, buddy, you want to bet me $50 that Brian's gonna lose?" And the guy stood up and yelled, "Hell yeah! I'll bet you $100." And Scott's like, "Really?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, I'll bet you money, any amount of money you want. Brian's gonna win this main event against these guys." And so Scott and this spectator, he was drunk with a big beer in his hand, they made a bet that Scott said I was going to lose, and the spectator said Brian's going to win this main event. So the main event went, I think it was 6 laps, and I was leading like 5 laps of the 6 laps, which was pretty good, I thought. And these guys are fast. You got Faria, Schwartz, and these guys. And they were just, these guys can fly. I think it was Robert Fencing was in the main event, and just all these top-notch guys who had probably raced in Europe and stuff. They were hot riders. Anyways, it was Faria, I believe. He caught me on lap 5, and then he passed me right before the finish line. I think 1 lap or a half lap before the finish line, Faria beat me. I got second place in the main event. And the announcer, Scott Lee, was very happy. He was like, "Yeah, I won the bet." And then Scott looks down, and the drunk guy with the beard and stuff, he got out of his seat and was running down the stands, the staircase. And Scott's like, "Hey, you come back here. You owe me $50." And the guy's like, "Later, dude, later." And he's running down, and Scott's like, "Get the security on that guy. He owes me $50." And the security didn't know what was happening. And this guy ran away, and Scott never got his $50 from the bet. The drunk guy, just ran away. And I got second place. But it was fun times at the Perris Speedway. It was a good time. And, the racing was a lot of fun, and the track was great, and the promoter was really a cool guy. And it was just a good time at the Perris. And I think I ended up closing due to some legal issue, but the Perris Speedway was a good time, and I got second place in that main event, and it was a good time. Every time I race, I go for the win. I don't go to like be in last place, even in D1. It was 13 years since I had last raced, so I did pretty good. I was a little bit younger at the time, and so that was helping me. But I had lost 13 years of racing, and that was a lot of time of losing of experience and stuff. I wish I had raced in those 13 years. I would have definitely been a better racer. But anyways, that was an experience at Perris Raceway. It was a fun raceway. It was a fast raceway, and it was good times. And if you missed the Perris Raceway at the fairgrounds in Paris, by the dam, by the lake, the big Paris lake there, you missed it. It was good. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today in the hive. In the hive. We're having a good time here talking about Speedway stories, about race stories, and about Perris Speedway stories today. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. Have a great day. And we're going to see you. Yeah, we're going to see you next time. Take care.